Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of The Opportunity. Today, I am talking to Taylor Smits, who is one of the co-owners of My FBA Prep. Now, this is a pretty cool company. This is a 3PL service, but it works a little bit different than probably most of the 3PLs you've heard about. The way that they have set up their network is almost like a Airbnb SaaS platform that gives you true coverage across the entire continental USA. And this was a really cool conversation. We got to peel back a little bit into this 3PL industry, a little about the nuances that I didn't know, such as a lot of the 3PL warehouses are almost like a side hustle, someone with an e-commerce store, for example, which can show in the customer service of the industry at times. So this was a really cool conversation. We went pretty in depth on a lot of different topics. And if you are an e-commerce seller, whether you're on Amazon or not, I think there's some pretty good lessons here, both on the logistics side, but also just in general of building a cool business. So let's get into this episode. Let's fast forward and get you right into the core of the value. Welcome back to another episode of The Opportunity. Today, I have Taylor Smits with me, one of the co-founders of My FBA Prep. Now, obviously, I've introduced you a little bit earlier on in the show, Taylor, but just real quick for our audience, could you introduce yourself and where you are in the world?
Yeah, my name is Taylor Smits. I'm one of three co-founders at My FBA Prep. Currently, I am in Maine, and I'll be heading from here to the Midwest to do a warehouse checkup and then out to California. So I'm often traveling, working with the warehouses in our network.
I saw on your LinkedIn, it says you're from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Are you like doing the whole remote setup there, or what's going on there?
Yeah, that's right. So for several years, I've spent more than half my time down in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, and it actually works pretty well for the business. We've done, I think, 3 kind of management offsites down in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, get a lot of work done and get to play a little bit. And then it's a direct flight to Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles. So a lot of the sites where we actually operate facilities, I'm able to get to very quickly. And it's worked out well because the weather's great and I'm not too far from the States for work. So yeah, that's accurate.
That's awesome. We were just talking a little bit offline about the whole digital nomad kind of style of living. I have a lot of friends who live there. I'm in Vietnam myself, which I usually hang out in Southeast Asia, but I've been kind of all over to these different digital nomad hubs. Always find it cool meeting another person doing it. You mentioned a bunch of facilities, which I want to get into. I think that's going to be, intriguing to talk about that later in the podcast. But first, let's start at the beginning here. Walk us through a little bit of your entrepreneurial journey. So you started in My FBA Prep. First off, give us just like the 30-second preview of what that is and how did you get there? Like, were you running your own FBA businesses that morphed into this, or what was that story?
Sure. So My FBA Prep is a network of warehouses. We're at about 58 or 59 warehouses today. Over 45 of those are in the US, and then the rest are in Canada, and then all over Europe, and a few in Asia. And so primarily what we do is we take in goods for e-commerce sellers, medium and large sellers, and we prepare them for the final destination. As our name suggests, the final destination used to be almost always Amazon. Now we've grown and we have our FBA Prep clients who are Amazon wholesale or Amazon private label sellers. We also do direct to consumer fulfillment, which is sort of our second revenue bucket. And then the third would be sending like what we call B2R, business to retail. We're taking in your goods and we're sending it to Walmart, Costco, Lowe's, Home Depot, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really what we are, a network of prep centers that can help e-commerce companies do whatever they want. So we're matchmakers who help e-commerce companies get their logistics needs done and so much more. So that is My FBA Prep. And then in terms of our background, we were sort of in a serendipitous way, we were connected. I used to work with one of my co-founders in New York City back in my corporate days. He had worked with our other co-founder on marketing projects for a shared client. And I was asked to join a phone call, and I said, hey, we're looking at starting an e-commerce company. Are you interested? And my partner, Tom, had done Amazon with a large merch company with licensed t-shirts, like from superhero movies, that sort of thing. I was running my own FBA wholesale business at the time. And our other partner, who's strong in operations finance, was really doing ad operations and other digital sort of tech and ad ops stuff. So we felt like it was a good, what we call three-legged stool in terms of complementary skill sets. And we got started in My FBA Prep about 4.5 years ago from now. And the truth is the beginning was slow. And then over the last 2.5 years, we've just been exploding in terms of taking on new large clients and growing them that way. So that's sort of a highlight of My FBA Prep. And then anything you want to dive deeper into, I'm happy to elaborate.
Yeah. So before My FBA Prep, before Amazon even, were you always keen on becoming a digital entrepreneur? Or did you kind of stumble into this, as many do, as I did, as kind of a side hustle at first?
Definitely the side hustle. And I'll say just a bit about my personal story. I was 10 years in New York City in the corporate world, sort of always wanted to do something a little more and really, take a chance on myself and say, could I get something off the ground? And I had been doing e-commerce. I started off by doing sports and concert tickets, sort of buying them on the on sales or the pre-sales, and then selling them closer to the concert time when the values are sky high. Most people don't like me in that scenario or that model, but I did that for 8 years. And Greg, it's really the digital nomad side of me. The last 2 years I was in New York City, I actually took a year to travel, and I asked my company if they would let me work remotely. And I was going to a different country every month for about 13 or 14 months. And it was during that time where I really said, I got to figure something out where I can have more control over my life. And so it was the lifestyle piece which made me think I should be working harder on my side hustle or getting something off the ground, because that was going to give me the freedom. And then really I fell in love with e-commerce, especially Amazon. I had done drop shipping, I had done private label, and then I got into wholesale, and I was just anything I could read about Amazon or learn. I'd spend all the money I had on every course that was out there. And it was just like really lucky. I said serendipitous earlier, timing when Bart and Tom, we had connected through Bart, and we decided to start this company. And there were a number of other ideas we had before this one that we did not pursue. And when we started My FBA Prep, it was just, the idea felt right. It felt like there was a huge need in the market. I'll share with you just 2 insights that we had. So at the time, the landscape of Amazon, if you pick a service that surrounds the ecosystem of being an Amazon seller, there was a name for most of those. So for example, product research, you would think of Jungle Scout or Helium 10, or now there's another good one, what's it called? There's a bunch of that. So yeah, that's reimbursements. So Gedida or Gedida, however you want to pronounce it, I've heard it both ways for reimbursements, or, there's a few other names in that space. If you look at Amazon Legal, you have like Riverbend Consulting. These are the ones you see at every conference you attend. Another great example would be whether it's Amazon or just kind of e-commerce or business overall. It's like, if you want to sell your company, Empire Flippers is like a name that comes to all the people I know, everyone's mind. That's where you go if you are ready to sell, but you're not sure how to do it. It's like, okay, you can get some consultants to guide you. We did not see that household name in the landscape for Amazon Prep. It just didn't exist. And I was like, that's crazy, because there's a go-to 1 or 2 companies in every Amazon area, if you're a seller that you know of, that, if you go to a conference or you're in a Facebook group and you're talking to other people, you start to see those names kind of bubble to the top in every facet of the business. But it didn't exist in the prep space. And really, if you were a wholesale seller, the prep space was 200 or 300, what I call mom and pop warehouses throughout the country. And it typically looks like this. An Amazon seller got a garage, his own garage, her own garage, started doing prep, and then said, you know what, I need more space. They rented a warehouse, and then they said, I'm going to fill the rest of the warehouse with my other friends or people I meet professionally who are Amazon sellers. And that was really what the landscape was when we dove in. And then if you think of sort of big brands that are doing their own fulfillment, like Adidas or Nike or anything you would see in a shopping mall, they all use traditional 3PLs for their fulfillment needs. So if you buy something on their website, it doesn't come from Adidas or Puma. It comes from a 3PL that is holding all that inventory and can pick, pack, and ship it better than Adidas or Puma could on their own. And so what we said is we want to bring those two together and close the gap. We want a enterprise level network of prep centers, but that have the training and specialize in Amazon Prep. And we've managed to tie our network together with our software, which is called Preptopia. And now what an e-commerce company could do is come to us and say, I need Amazon Prep, and I also need 2-day fulfillment anywhere in the US. How can you help me? And we say, well, we'll put together a solution. We'll give you New Jersey, Michigan, and California as locations to house your inventory. When orders come in that are direct to consumer or that are FBM, anywhere in the country, you'll be able to reach that person in 2 days. We can handle your Amazon Prep. And by the way, we're going to tie all of that together with our software, Preptopia, which is going to give you a control tower view of where your inventory is, how long it's been at the warehouse, how long it takes for us to prep it, what your inventory levels are based on what's gone out to your customers, et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of vision early on has really driven us, and I believe we've nearly gotten there. I am always surprised when I go to a conference and I meet someone, they go, oh yeah, I've heard of you. I've heard of My FBA Prep. Like, that's a huge compliment because that's sort of us realizing what early on we said was what we were chasing. Like, we want to be the name in the space for Amazon Prep. Yeah, so that's just a bit of background as to how we got where we are today.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, there's a few, I think, just general key entrepreneurial lessons from what you just said there. Like, one, you were mentioning looking at a space you like, a space you're operating in already. You're seeing in so many ways these giants of the space, in a sense, like Helium 10 and Jungle Scout, right? That you mentioned. You wondering like, okay, well, where does one of those not exist within this space? And you found this. And I think you're right, because I know a handful of FBA prep companies, but like you said, I wouldn't say any of them, or at least 2 years ago, I wouldn't say any of them were like, that's the place you go. So I think that's smart just from almost a competitive analysis standpoint. But you mentioned another thing, and I genuinely don't know this. So I'm curious. And also maybe it'll help explain what a 3PL in general is better for our audience out there that might not be in e-commerce or looking to get in. But you mentioned like companies like Nike shipping to more of these traditional 3PLs versus, me just renting a warehouse and starting my own little 3PL side business on top of my e-commerce business. What are the differences between, like, first explain what a 3PL is very briefly, but then tell me the difference between someone who has that warehouse versus these more traditional levels of being a 3PL that it sounds like you're going towards. Is it just that enterprise white glove service, or is there a bunch of different things that are going on behind the scenes there that people can benefit from?
Sure. So 3PL stands for third party logistics. And if you're Nike, first party logistics is Nike has Nike employees who are sending those goods and driving them in a Nike van to your house. And second party logistics is Nike has a contract with FedEx that FedEx goes to Nike's warehouse, picks up the boxes and drives it in a van over to the customer's house. And then third party logistics is Nike sends its inventory to a warehouse, and the warehouse picks, packs, and ships it using whatever carriers they want. So the third party is really just the separation between the company whose inventory it is and who's doing the warehousing work. And then the difference between sort of traditional 3PLs and the landscape I was explaining with the 200 to 300 mom and pop FBA prep centers is traditional 3PLs exist for mainly direct-to-consumer fulfillment and providing business to retail services. But traditional 3PLs often do not have any Amazon expertise in their buildings. So an example would be, we have a partnership, My FBA Prep, with Seco Logistics. Now, Seco Logistics is a $2.2 billion logistics company that does warehousing, but also does tons of other stuff like freight forwarding and customs clearance and et cetera, et cetera. And this is globally. So what does My FBA Prep bring to a $2.2 billion company that's been doing it for decades, longer than we have? Well, what we bring to them is the Amazon expertise. So we say to them, hey, we want to bring you these customers that are Amazon businesses, and we want to perform those services in your warehouses. We'll teach you how to do it, and we will manage the process of operating and doing that prep for the customers. And now a big company like Seco Logistics has a new group of customers that they can make revenue on, right? Which is Amazon sellers. And surprise, surprise, all of the traditional 3PLs are finding out that actually there are tons of what we call Amazon native brands that do quite a bit of volume. And if you're in warehousing, if you're in logistics, you want to look at that and say, can we add that to our customer base? So just as an example, Seco Logistics or My FBA Prep, we get excited because we would say, well, wait a minute, if you have a big brand online and you're bringing goods in from Asia to sell it on Amazon, you can make money on the cargo going from Asia to, let's say, the United States, landing in California. You can make money on a customs clearance that happens at the port. You can make money on the freight side of taking it in trucks from California, the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, where it lands, to the warehouses. For us, one example would be in Riverside or in Ontario or Drupa Valley or Paris, California. We have a lot of warehouses in that area, as most logistics companies do. And then you can make money on touching each individual good and getting it ready for Amazon. So if you're a traditional 3PL and you don't have Amazon clients as part of your customer base, then My FBA Prep, that's our pitch to them, is don't you want to open up your revenue stream to Amazon? And believe it or not, I mean, many of these large kind of old existing businesses just haven't learned how to do Amazon yet. So that's our offering to the warehouses, is like, hey, we would like to bring these Amazon clients to you. And then our offering to the clients is simple. It's very much like an Airbnb model where we are saying, you tell us where you need your inventory to sit and we'll put it there and then we'll do the prep or the fulfillment that you need. So if you'll let me go one step deeper on the Airbnb analogy, it goes something like this. If Airbnb is a company or a platform that connects travelers and hosts in just about any city or country around the world, what My FBA Prep is a platform where we connect e-commerce businesses with warehouses to perform the services they need. And the further you push that analogy, the more it works. So Airbnb is not just a one-bedroom apartment in New York City when I'm in New York. You could have, say, a yoga retreat facility in Vietnam that is on Airbnb. You could have, a cabin in the woods. You could have something in the desert. So for us, what that means is we have warehouses that specialize in very specific things. Like they have very expensive shrink wrap machines for cosmetics companies who want their products to look high end and they want to satisfy every sort of FDA compliance issue or Amazon compliance issue. For Amazon, it's simple and liquids where you need 2 caps. So if you have a cap on the product and you have shrink wrap on top of it, then it gets satisfied with that. So shrink wrap is specific, bundling is specific, kitting is specific, FBA prep can be specific. Are you guys familiar with sending inventory into Costco and everything that has to be followed in terms of Costco's regulations? So we're partnering these e-commerce companies with a warehouse that knows how to perform the services that client needs and that's in the geographic area where the inventory needs to live. And that has been sort of our big competitive advantage with this Airbnb analogy or our asset-light model, is that we can go to warehouses all over the country, and now we're doing it in several other countries, and say, what are you good at? Okay, you can do this today. We can partner you with this client right now. Oh, by the way, can we come in? Can we train you on Amazon Prep? Because if you knew Amazon Prep, then you could take this client we have on the East Coast, here on the West Coast. We can grow that client with you because they have a need here. So that's been our sort of secret sauce in terms of how we execute. And just like Airbnb, it's really allowed us to serve our clients where we can say, you tell us where you need to be, and we'll give you the option to run your prep or run your fulfillment in that geographic area.
That's fascinating. So I want to go into how e-commerce stores, FBA people can really benefit from this, but I want to stick a little bit on to how you guys are building this. Because one of the questions I was going to ask you is like, okay, so you mentioned you had this network of facilities and warehouses. my first thought, like, okay, maybe this is kind of like a real estate play for you as an entrepreneur in the sense of, like a self-storage unit almost would be like a rough analogy perhaps. But you're actually going out there and finding people who basically already have this, but they are, incumbents in a lot of ways. They just haven't caught up to the tide. So I'm curious, and I think it's brilliant because it basically turns like what could seem to be a very high barrier of entry for what you're doing to lower in some sense. Like you don't have to own all the real estate around the nation, right? But with these bigger companies, how did you get your foot in the door? Like, did you reach out to them on LinkedIn? Like, did you send them an email? Like, hey, I think you guys would really want this. Like, how did that whole thing happen? And how long did it take for a deal like that to go through for you guys to really start benefiting from this type of stuff?
Sure. So my partner Tom handles our sales side. So we have a sales team, and we do a number of things to try and get new clients in the door. So one of them is just the typical content and marketing, which will help boost our SEO and just get some sort of brand awareness with people in the Amazon space already. That's sort of very top of the funnel and not tied so much to like direct response as it is just brand awareness. Then we have LinkedIn funnels where we're getting in groups when we're putting content up that's specific to the space, so that when a supply chain officer at a brand reads that post, he or she will make the connection that, oh, My FBA Prep is a company that could actually serve my needs if I need a temperature controlled facility in Tennessee for my snack brand, right? Yes, we use LinkedIn. We also do some email marketing. We're taking what we believe to be known medium and large brands and trying to start a conversation with them and try and give them interesting content that may or may not be relevant to exactly where they are right now. But then if they happen to get a request, let's say it's a LinkedIn connection request from my partner Tom, they might make the connection and say, oh, I saw this post you guys did, or I was at the same conference you were at. And then really what it turns into is, do you guys have current problems you're experiencing with your supply chain? Or is there anything on the horizon that you're nervous about? So for example, Amazon Prime Day was in July. And so May and June, we were pretty busy because a lot of our sellers were saying, I'm trying to prep as much inventory as I can ahead of Prime Day and certainly ahead of Amazon's cutoff for Prime Day inventory so that I'm fully stocked. And then, of course, right around the corner is Q4. And so a lot of companies like that are big enough to work with us, medium and large sellers, they absolutely have a solution today. When we come into the picture is when we are offering a better solution. So for example, maybe they have a warehouse on the East Coast. I'm dealing with this. I'll be in California next week or two meeting a client that's flying in from Asia. And they already have a facility they own and operate on the East Coast. So why do they want to meet with us? Well, we can give them a West Coast location. But rather than them purchasing a building, which again would be like 1P, they want to go 3P, third-party logistics, and have us run their warehouse, so to speak. And I do that with air quotes around it because we're going to put them into a warehouse that has 3 or 4 other clients as well. Like we're not just opening the warehouse just for them. We're putting them in a facility that we have space, and they will be one of the clients that are in there. But that's the advantage that we're offering. It's typically not companies that are doing it themselves who then say to us, hey, could you do this? It's like people who are, if they are doing it themselves, let's say we have a client that does supplements in Chicago. They have their own co-packer in Chicago. They have their own warehouse. Well, guess what? Around Q4, when their volume spikes like 4x a normal month, they say, hey, we don't have enough labor. We don't have enough physical space. We don't have enough bays in our warehouse for the trucks to pull up to. Like, can you help us out? And we say, sure. And that company in particular I'm thinking about was sending us 6 truckloads of nutritional supplements, 6 a week, to get prepped and sent into Amazon during their busy time. And that was overflow for them. So we typically come into the picture when there's like a value add and we're saying, well, we're going to take your company's supply chain to the next level because we're going to give you the benefits of our extensive network, or give you the benefits of having multiple nodes throughout the country to do your supply chain and fulfillment needs in. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely on the FBA side. I think it's an elegant solution. I can see the entrepreneur right now with all their whey protein powder. What am I going to do? My warehouse is completely filled. I'm screwed with Prime Day. So I can see where this obviously comes in and helps them in a lot of big ways. I think it's fascinating you partnered with these more old school traditional 3PLs in that way. And I think that's super smart. So let's get into some of the questions of what an e-commerce, what an FBA seller should be asking here. So let's say my business is growing, right? And I am looking to get a 3PL. Maybe I'm sending everything just direct to Amazon right now, which I know a lot of people starting off do. And I always do recommend eventually you switch over to 3PL for reasons, which, we'll get into. But in general, if I'm brand new to this, what kind of questions should I be asking a 3PL provider to make sure I'm catching any red flags that do exist in the industry that I might not be familiar with because I don't work in it, or some green flags oh, what they said here is this is exactly what I want. What do those questions look like?
Sure. So if you're an Amazon seller, probably the biggest thing to pay attention to is what is the turnaround time for your process to get prepped? So the reason that's important is because your inventory cycle is for e-commerce sellers is how often or how long does it take for you to turn your inventory? So a really, really great e-commerce company is doing about one turn every 30 days, which means when they spend money on manufacturing, they're ordering enough goods to last them 30 days, and in 30 days they will run out of supply and it'll be on their next cycle. And a way to think of this is if somebody's looking at a stock price, they'll say, oh, the stock went from $10 to $15, it had a 50% increase in 2021 last year, let's say. What's implied there is that the denominator, the unit of time, is 12 months, is 1 year, right? So when you're in e-commerce, if you can get that as close to, say, 1 month as possible, then that's phenomenal. You're still great, by the way, if you're turning your inventory, let's say 4 or 5 times a year. I mean, that's really ideal because that's really getting the compound effect of your money in terms of purchasing your inventory, you're selling it through, you're making your profits, and then you're able to reinvest that money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the original point there is that if you're an Amazon seller and you're spending all your money on inventory, you want to know how long it takes for your warehouse to prep it and get it into Amazon, because that period is going to affect your cash flow cycle. Before you even think about your cash flow cycle, you're going to say, am I out of stock of those units or not? I mean, that's kind of in layman's terms, what's going to happen first is you're going to say, well, I need to make sure I keep that in stock, right? So that's probably the most important question. In terms of looking through
real quick on turnover before you go to the next question. So that's an interesting stat. You said the average e-commerce store is 30 days for turning over their inventory?
Yeah, so let me be specific. That's not average at all. That's the best case scenario, and that's probably geared more towards wholesale sellers. When it comes to private label sellers, there are different reasons why you would want a shorter or longer inventory cycle. So for example, if you have to send all of your inventory in one full container, because that will save you money shipping from Asia to the US, rather than going FCL, full container load, you want to go LCL, less than container load. So you're sending on pallets instead of full container. The most optimized solution is if you can afford to order enough where it fills up an entire container. And you might fill up an entire container to save, especially in the post-pandemic days, what is a lot of money, right? It's more expensive than it's ever been.
For sure.
Container prices got up to $16,000 or $20,000 to go from Asia to the US at the worst of the pandemic. I think we're in the 12 to 14 range right now. It's come down a little bit. But that would be an acceptable reason for an e-commerce seller, let's say in this case, a private label or a brand, for a seller to say, well, I'm going to take a 6-month inventory turn cycle. So that container is going to last me 6 months of inventory versus ordering against 3 months. Because if I order and have 6 months of inventory, I can put it in the container, then I save money to send that container from Asia to the US. So, if you're a wholesale seller and you're ordering in the US and all your suppliers are from the US, a lot of the clients that we service, they're ordering against what they anticipate to be a 30-day cycle. And then it almost always bleeds into, say, a 40-day cycle for a lot of reasons, most of them around the time it takes for the inventory to get delivered to a warehouse or to go from a warehouse to Amazon and then get checked in at Amazon, which, is sort of out of everyone's control. So yeah, like the turnaround times are a huge deal. And then for Amazon sellers in particular, like what you really need to be asking yourself as you're on the phone with the warehouse, if you can even get them on the phone, is I believe these guys have a lot of experience in the type of Amazon model that I am performing with my brand. So if it's private label, you say, what other clients do you have that have similar commodities to what I'm processing, right? What sort of prep work do you have to do for them? So you don't need to go to them and give them step-by-step what you need done. A better way to find out if they're the right fit for you is to say, hey, I'm an Amazon seller. Can you explain to me what types of Amazon clients you have and what sort of prep requirements they have? And if you ask that open-ended question, you should then be thinking like, do I believe these people know what they're talking about? And just one sort of concrete example of that is what you'll often find is that warehouses are used to doing 1P on Amazon as opposed to 3P. So what that means is when Amazon reaches out to a brand, let's say Clorox bleach, right? Clorox bleach does not want to do the inventory management on hundreds of SKUs through the Clorox brand. So Amazon says to them, hey, Clorox, we're going to put all of your SKUs on Amazon and don't worry about promoting it. We're going to handle it. And so a lot of warehouses that have that Clorox in their inventory are going to be sending into Amazon, which is basically a pick report that comes from Amazon saying, we need to restock these SKUs. Now that 1P Amazon PO or fulfillment request is much different than if you are, Bob's Widgets and you need an FN SKU label on each of your items. And by the way, your widgets come in 10 colors or 5 sizes or whatever. So that third-party Amazon seller request that requires individual units to have unique FN SKU labels on them is much different than 1P. So if you're asking that open-ended question to your warehouse, you do Amazon prep, tell me about it. And they say, well, we get these orders from Amazon and we send them in and that's how we do it. You say, well, wait a minute. They're doing Amazon 1P fulfillment, but I'm a 3P seller. 3P meaning, you're
that is a great little nuance there because I didn't know that. I mean, it makes sense that Amazon has something like that for the bigger brands, but I could see a newbie FBA seller like, oh yeah, okay. It sounds like everything's fine. They just said they send tons of stuff to Amazon.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that happens all the time. And by the time we come in the picture, we say, well, tell us where your goods are sitting now, or where's the inventory coming from? And they'll say it's coming from another warehouse. We say, really? That sounds like there's a good story there. And a lot of times they say, yeah, well, they told me they know Amazon, but then when I sent my inventory, they didn't know what to do. And then that was my sign that they really didn't understand what my needs were. And
yeah, I have a friend, he's in the FBA world, and he recently just told me like his 3PL warehouse is just ghosting him. So yeah. I imagine there's all sorts of hiccups with the way you describe, the industry landscape. It's kind of the mom and pops are kind of doing it on the side to their main e-commerce business. It's fascinating.
Yeah. So warehouses are not known. This can be another question for anyone in the audience to ask their warehouse. Warehouses are not known for having great customer service.
As my friend found out, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's not uncommon. So the first thing is like, who do I contact if something goes wrong? And if the person says, oh, you just call us, or oh, you just email us, they're not telling you the truth. Either you have a specific person you're going to call or a specific person you're going to email, or you have the general person you call or email, which means there's nobody and no one's going to respond to that. So right. I can save a lot of people a lot of time. If they're not telling you, you have a dedicated account manager who you will have their cell phone, or you'll have a weekly meeting with them on Zoom, or you'll have their email, then you will not be able to contact your warehouse in the event that you have questions that need answered or something has gone wrong, period. Most warehouses, that's a really easy place to not spend money is on sort of customer service, right? Warehouses want to spend their money on people who are on the floor making them money.
I guess they're role modeling that off of Amazon's customer service. Like, hey, Amazon does it, right? Must be the recipe for success.
Yeah, that's the best thing I've heard in a long time is that they're modeling it after Amazon. I mean, absolutely. So, yeah, and I'll just brag about our client services team at My FBA Prep. We've gone the other route, and we said, well, if that's something that every warehouse isn't doing, not only do we want to do it, but we want to do it in a shockingly amazing fashion. So we hire all of the people who work on our client services team have gone to college, have worked in Amazon, have created Amazon shipments themselves, and who typically have either worked for a large Amazon brand or sell on Amazon themselves. We have one client service manager right now who, when we hired her, she was living in Seattle and working for Amazon. We want to answer that question, that just what I told you, to have the audience ask their warehouses, tell me about what you know about Amazon. That's exactly what we do when we hire our account managers or our client services team. Tell me where it is all of your great Amazon experience. We say, okay. And then we don't just let them say, well, I work for a company that sold a lot on Amazon. We're like, great. What did you do for them? Did you create, inbound shipments? And the deeper we go, when people are answering this, like if they're good at what they do, they're often confused, like why we're going into such detail on an interview, because for them, it's like second nature. If I were to say to you, like, do you speak English? And you'd say, yeah, of course I speak English. I grew up in the US. Okay, where'd you grow up? Tell me about it. How many English classes did you take? Like, the more I push on that, the more you're like, what's wrong with this guy? Doesn't he know that I speak English?
The most awkward interview.
It's so weird, right? But what the good person doesn't know is how many, I don't want to say bad person, but unqualified people every warehouse or every company has gone through, where you realize this person does not actually know what they're talking about, and they don't know what they're doing. We have to be hiring the best client services people. And here's another reason, which it's so simple to look back on this, but if you imagine like most warehouses and you think of people who work in warehouses, those are typically, let's just say, hourly employees. And the labor can shift a lot. The labor contracts in a bad economy. In Q4, if you're in California, you literally cannot find enough employees to get all the work done that you need. And you offer overtime to people, your existing employees, to try and get the work done. And you hire everyone's cousins, nephews, brothers, parents, uncles, aunts. I promise you, during Q4, it's an absolute mess to try and get enough labor in the floor. So most companies are having these individuals doing the customer service, which is better than nothing. But we're trying to overinvest in these folks and say, we don't want that. We want the best of the best people. And here's why. Our clients, at a minimum, are doing $10 million a year on Amazon, all the way up to a few $100 million. And our largest client is an outlier. They've done, in the course of them being around, they've done nearly $3 billion in sales on Amazon.
Wow.
And that's over 10 plus years. Okay. So I don't want to be blowing this up.
It's impressive. Not that impressive. 10 years. It's quite big. It's amazing.
It's huge. But if you think about it, what does that mean? So our smallest customer at $10 million a year, that's their Amazon sales. Okay. And let's say that makes them spending, just rough numbers here, 100 grand a month with us. Okay. They're spending 100 grand a month with us. Our client services folks who are managing and running that account, they're often talking to the owners of these businesses, because supply chain, logistics, prep, fulfillment is a huge part of running your business when you're in e-commerce. It's a huge part of it. So we don't want hourly warehouse folks who are amazing at driving forklifts, who are great at running the shrink wrap machine, who know how to pick the right size box without making any measurements to put all of the candles or the widgets in. Yeah, that's their strength. But when your client, at a minimum, does $10 million a year, we have to hire professionals who can actually speak their language and understand what they're asking, and then give them the right answer that's based in Amazon terms and conditions if their prep work is specific to Amazon. So we've said, not only is it crazy that many of our warehouses don't hire customer service folks, but we think it's crazy that they don't hire super well-paid, super smart, great people who have e-commerce experience in their background, because you don't want to put a $15 an hour employee on the phone with a $10 million a year CEO of his or her own little e-commerce company. That's not a fit. Like, they're not going to write a great review about your company if you do that. And looking backwards, you can say, oh, of course, well, that's obvious. But it's not obvious when the status quo in the industry is to either not have customer service folks or not have folks who have actually literally worked deep in these businesses. So we try and hire based, as I hope have made clear now, we try and hire based on people who have deep experience in the e-commerce space and in the, what I call like the intersection of e-commerce and warehousing. Like, that's where we want to hire our best talent from. And we often say, like, it's our whole world is finding great service on these accounts. Because, if things are going well, you don't see what happens in your warehouse. You don't have a lot of interactions with your warehouse. So the way you differentiate yourself is you say, well, who's there? Who picks up the phone when things aren't going well? Who does the client call? How often do they hear from them? What do those emails look like? Are they getting reports from us that are showing, hey, you've just prepped, your 1 millionth book with us. You've just sent 300,000 units and your previous high was 200,000 units with us. Like, we want to celebrate that. And so our client service folks are good enough to go do the research and figure out what are those milestones that we want to share with the clients and give it back to them. So we're extremely proud of sort of the client services we're able to offer to the businesses we serve.
So again, I would say that's a good business lesson for really any business owner that's listening to this. There's a thing I often ask. So like me coming from a background in the SEO world, I got my start in affiliate marketing. And a common thing is like, give me the shortcut. Like, what's the path to riches? Like, how do I get there? I know, right? And I feel like a lot of times the answer is the hard path is the short path. And what you just said, like, your industry has very few when it comes to customer service, like very few skills in that from the sounds of it. That is the hard path, right? Like no one else is doing it. They probably do think of it now and again, but they think it's hard. But in a lot of ways, that is the short path, because if you're able to do that hard thing, then your level of service just goes way up. Now you're not the guy who's getting like beaten up on Trustpilot or wherever, you're getting these glowing reviews, and it creates that whole virtuous cycle over and over again, which hiring to me, I think is the key. Like I tell entrepreneurs all the time, like one of your biggest leverage for growth and wealth creation is almost always in the delegation and the hiring. So that's awesome to hear. Before we get into the more rapid fire questions, I wanted to ask you oversee like a lot of stuff that's happening in the supply chain with your customer base. I know the last 2 years especially has been quite interesting. I'm sure you have a lot of stories you could share of yourself of like things going haywire or just working weird over the last 2 years. But now that we're at the tail end of the pandemic, there's still, some stuff that's going on, obviously, that's causing issues. But what kind of trends are you seeing now when it comes to the fulfillment ecosystem? And do you think those trends will continue, or do you think those are going to reverse?
Yeah, I was listening to another supply chain professional try and answer this question. And one of the things he said is like, for starters, people need to understand that you can't look at supply chain and predict what's going to happen as if they're trends that will last 5-10 years or anything like that. He's like, there's kind of what's happening now and what are we doing this year, and even 12 months out, it's like that's probably our plan, but in 6 months from now, things could change one way or another. And I thought that was just interesting to set the scene of like, supply chain is not a sales graph that it's like you have 7 years of prior history, you have your trajectory, you have your slope, and you could say, if we just follow the same slope, we're going to be at 200% of where we are in 13 months. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so what is happening now? Well, the container rates have gone down a little bit, right? That's good. And you could say, like, it wouldn't surprise me if somebody looks at that and says, well, if they were 17,000 a container a year ago and they're 14,000 now, then maybe a year from now they'll be 12,000. And by the way, pre-pandemic, that average was like 4,000, 4,500.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that cheap back then. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
What a hike.
It's still like 3 to 4x inflated of what it should be, right? So rates have come down a little bit, but what I see right now is there's a lot of unrest in California around the truckers who go to the ports and pick up the inventory. And it just so happens that we bring in more goods from Asia and California than any other state. And then you look at California, and I don't want to say anything politically here, but I want to talk legally, like what is California's laws? What do they look like? And the analogy is what's going on with the truck drivers is the same thing that was happening with the Uber drivers in California. And it's this idea of, will the state allow independent contractors to work like this, or do they have to be full-time? And I'll just add my 2 cents here. My 2 cents is this. In the case of Uber, what the state's legislation was trying to do is say to a company like Uber, hey, the way that you guys are hiring these individuals, they really are employees of your company, and you need to treat them that way and cover their benefits, as one example. That's what the state was saying. in this case, the state is saying, based on similar legislation, that wait a minute, you can't have independent contractors going to the ports and picking up containers that have just landed from Asia and then taking them to a warehouse. And so then the question becomes, well, what do they want? What they want is they want full-time employees who are working for trucking companies that will, handle that service of picking up the containers. And the status quo by the way, if you're not in tune to what's going on, the status quo has been you have both. You have big trucking companies who send, hundreds, if not thousands of trucks a day that are under their name to the ports to pick up goods and take them away. But you also have individuals who say, I want to make my own schedule. I want to work, and if I don't, I don't. Or I want to own a small business with 3 truckers. I'm a trucker, my wife's a trucker, and our friends are truckers, and everyone works for my company, but it's a small company, and we're independent contractors. And we just want to go pick up loads that you can basically, air quotes again, read off the board. And I'm going to go pick up that load and do that run, taking that truck that truckload from the port, pick up the container, take it to a warehouse. Okay, well, right now, the legislation is saying we don't want those independent contractors to be able to do that. And for simplicity's sake, just say, I don't know why the state of California wants to get involved in that, because you have probably equal numbers on both sides. Some people saying, and I think the picketing lines that you see are people saying, I'm an independent contractor because I wanted to start my own trucking business. Therefore, I want to be able to pick up at the port. Please don't change the legislation and affect me negatively. And then there are other, say, union groups, and the union groups are saying, no, everyone should be unionized. Everyone who is going to pick up at the ports needs to be part of an organization, and they believe it's in everyone's best interest to do it that way. Now, I have absolutely no say or no opinion on what the right solution is. But what I will tell you is, right now, those truck drivers in California are operating without clear legislation as to whether what they are doing is above board or compliant with the law or not. And everyone in logistics in California is afraid of a strike or of not reaching an agreement with the state that would prevent the goods from moving the way that they are now. And everyone's saying, oh goodness, please don't let that happen, because if that happens, it's going to have large effects on the rest of the, down the chain or down the water flow, if you will, which means for us consumers, prices could go up, or you can't get the things you want, which also means prices will go up, or just like other delays where it's like, oh, I ordered something, but I can't get it because they can't finish manufacturing in the US because they're raw goods haven't come in.
Yeah, I could see. I didn't know about that happening over there. I did know that the harbor was, getting backed up. I had heard reports things were getting a little bit better, but maybe not. Yeah, that can definitely lead to some fulfillment logistic problems. So kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier. You're talking to the professional. Hey, how's this going to look in 10 years? Like, we don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So I have one final question for you before we get into the rapid fire questions. And that's really, this could be a personal thing or it could be a business thing. But as you're building My FBA Prep and you have this, interesting, almost SaaS-based like approach with what you're doing with your network, what has been the biggest obstacle for you in building and scaling the business?
Oh boy. In my mind right now, I'm thinking about like 30 to 40 obstacles.
a lot of pain competing with each other. Huh?
Yeah. Overall, the ideas we have are great and they're easy to conceptualize, but the execution is painfully difficult. And, there are just some things that are hard to sort of trudge through. So I'll give just a few examples. One example would be on the technology side. I mentioned a 3-legged bar stool earlier. If there's one area that does not come naturally for either of the 3 co-founders, it's on the tech side. And so where our platform is at today is we've spent a lot of money and hired a lot of people to try and pitch it and bring it to where it needs to be. And today, I think our platform is great for what we set out to be. And that was a network of prep centers for Amazon wholesale and private label sellers where we can manage all of their inventory on our platform. Well, guess what? It took us 2 years longer than we thought to get to where we are today. And it took us, let's say, 2 years shorter than we thought to grow our revenues by some big percentage or big goal that we had back in the day. So what does that mean? We now have revenue streams today that did not exist when we wrote down what our platform needed to do from a technology standpoint. And so just this idea in business that like your business is changing, it's on the same trend line as what you thought it was going to be, but like, hey, you found a revenue stream over here and you're going to chase it. Well, guess what? Your technology, like when you lay it out, it didn't have that in the scope when you wrote the scope 2 years ago. And so like to try and make everything happen in real time is extremely difficult. And we're finding, I mean, really our solution has been like integrations and APIs. That is how we have handled the problem that I'm telling you about. But oh my goodness, it has not been easy. And the other thing is like, I love this idea of like what's called unknown unknowns. You know, it's like there's the things you know, there's the things you don't know, and then there's these unknown unknowns. An unknown unknown for me that I can give tied to this problem is that like I didn't know that if we built a platform or a technology that would solve the customer's needs, that they might not want to use it, even if they want to use us as their service provider. Like that never crossed my mind. And it's hilarious the amount of times that we say to our clients, okay, all of the questions you just asked me are in Preptopia. Let's get on a call so we can walk you through how and where that is inside the system. And we get mixed responses to that. But oftentimes it's like, I don't want to use the system. I want an Excel report. I want an Excel sheet. Or can you send it to me in an email? I don't log into any systems. I'm not a systems guy. Okay. So that's one. And then another would be like the customers, our clients, when they come to us in the sales process, they give us the list of requirements. I need warehouses in these regions. I need to perform these services. I need your turnaround prices to be, or your turnaround times to be X, and I need your prices to be at Y. Okay, great. We check all those boxes, which is a lot. I'm simplifying it for the sake of this conversation, but we check all those boxes, and then they say, oh, by the way, I don't want to use your system. Not only do I not want to use your system, I don't want to use, a WMS, warehouse management system, that is top tier that, the warehouse might have or that we might use for other clients. I don't want to use any of that. I want you to use my system. I developed this system. I paid people, and it has in it what I need for reporting purposes that go to my bookkeepers. And it's like, oh, wow. We've spent literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars building our technology. And then a customer that we really want to work with and wants to work with us will come to us and say, yeah, I don't want to do it that way. I want to do it my way. And so the execution of like, well, for years we've been pouring money into this, we've been dreaming about it, we've been solving the problems, we've been climbing the hill, and we finally think it's at a great point, and we want to, we want all the new clients who are looking at working with us to get excited about it. And then for reasons that are unknown to me, they say they have other plans. So that's tough. I'd say that's tough.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those classic things, right? An entrepreneur building something that solves a pain, but doesn't realize like, yeah, this guy prefers email, which to me, maybe that guy needs to take a course on systems. If he's doing it by email, that seems very messy, but people will be people, I guess, in that sense. Well, we're reaching at the top of the hour here, so I want to get into the rapid fire questions. So my question for you is, are you ready for the most high pressured part of the show where you answer these questions in 30, 40 seconds? Could be 1-2 sentences, just first thing that comes from the top of your mind.
I sure hope so. Let's do it.
All right, no pressure. Don't worry. If you don't do good, we'll edit it out. I'm kidding. We'll keep it in. Show the failure. Awesome. So the rapid fire questions, my very first one for you is, in your opinion, with your experience of working with FBA and working with these sellers, what, in your view, is the best hidden growth opportunities in the FBA world today?
TikTok.
TikTok?
Yes.
That was an unexpected answer. Yeah. Well, you got to go a little bit further.
Especially like lately, we're recording this in August of 22. Facebook has just changed and Instagram has just changed to look more like TikTok. Lots of my friends from the agency world, what you're seeing is paid placement on TikTok is cheaper and gets better response than Instagram currently. And I think that has to do with sort of the novelty. It's a new platform, but just the TikTok algorithm is so addictive and so fun. I'll put it like this. The best stories I have heard from my Amazon seller friends in the last 2 years have all been about going viral on TikTok. Just coincidentally, in all three cases, not on purpose, meaning in two of the cases, they did not pay anything. In one case, they didn't even know the person who posted the video. And it had just crazy disproportionate positive results on the sales. And I think not enough people are treating TikTok like the commercial environment that Facebook used to be and then Instagram was. And now we're kind of nauseous to seeing all the ads on those platforms. So new platform, new opportunity. And right now, all the pricing looks good.
As a marketer, I 100% agree with you. I think TikTok is I think it's probably going to be TikTok and Twitter that wins the social media wars. I mean, Twitter, they're old hat, but they've really revitalized lately. But I strong vision for TikTok beating. And you're right, the algorithm is nuts there. I actually have a friend out here. He started a TikTok like travel blog, like I guess like travel talk or whatever. But he got like super famous in his little local area, so it weirded him out too much because the virality was so intense. Just like everyone on his neighborhood started like recognizing, like, oh, hey, you're the guy. The guy from TikTok.
Yeah.
He's like, well, this is a bit weird. So he like shut it down. But I have friends just absolutely crushing it on TikTok. So I think you're right. That's a very solid answer. And I think a lot of people don't realize how powerful that is as a marketing channel yet. But moving to the next question here, what tools or resources can people use to help streamline their logistics?
I think Preptopia is a great one. That's our system. And I would say, just going off of our clients' experience, another one that I'll throw out is NetSuite. So for our largest clients, let's say north of 100 million a year, almost all of them are asking us to integrate our system Preptopia with NetSuite. And the key reason there is they are trying to tie profitability down to the unit. And in a special case, we service lots of Amazon aggregators, these companies that are basically look like private equity firms that have lots of money. They're buying up these Amazon brands to make a larger portfolio. They need to know if they're sending us on one container inventory from 5 different brands, that saves them money. But when we prep it and send them an invoice, they need to be able to then split that out across the 5 different brands and allocate the costs appropriately. NetSuite is the solution that we're getting the most requests for. So Preptopia integrated with NetSuite is sort of a home run for the aggregators. And if you were to ask my tech team, that's something they're dealing with every day.
Awesome. So my final question for you, and perhaps the hardest on this list, is what has been your funniest moment working within the e-commerce industry?
My funniest moment working in e-commerce, I'd have to say it's spending time with my partners. I'll give you 2 sort of fun examples, which I don't often share, but it's the rapid fire round, so it's the first thing that comes to my mind. I had a bet that involved on one side me and one of my partners, and on the other side our third partner. And we were at an offsite and we were sort of trading scenarios, looking at the financials, saying, what do we have to do to get here? What do we have to do to get there? Long story short, we had a small bet that was Tom, who heads our sales team, says, well, I bet I can get us to this revenue goal in this amount of time. And we're like, no way are you going to hit it. Well, sure enough, he hits it. And Bart and I had to buy him a bottle of Pappy, which at the time was $3,500 to $4,000. So that was like pretty funny to get to like celebrate and enjoy. And then rather than stopping, we did the exact opposite, which sometimes happens when you're a bunch of competitive guys and egging each other on. And he took that revenue goal and he added a multiple to it. And I think it was actually me who threw out the proposition, which I can't say I regret it now, but I said, well, if you get to X, and just imagine X was a very, very big number. So if you get to X, I'll get a tattoo. And he's like, no way. I mean, this is the edited version, but no way would you do that. And I said, yeah, you do it and I'll get there. And I don't know, about 5 or 6 months ago, I found myself getting our company logo tattooed on my arm while drinking whiskey in Mexico. So that camaraderie, it's nice to have, partners that you enjoy spending time with. And, we have a lot of fun moments like that, which makes all the crappy moments worth it as we're trying to grow. And
that's awesome. I have kind of related. So a lot of our sellers, good friends with a lot of them that come on to sell their business, just meeting them at conferences or whatever. And so I always try to convince them, you should get an Empire Flippers tattoo. I've not convinced anyone yet to do it, but still throwing that challenge out there to the audience. If anyone wants to get an Empire Flippers tattoo, bonus points if you also get the FBA Prep logo on there as well. Why not do both?
Why not do both? You should look up. There's a guy who just did I think it's like a 12 by 12 tattoo on his back of a Subway, and now he gets Subway sandwiches for life. And I just thought,
I've heard of the story. Yeah, that is awesome.
I don't know. I like those questions, but those are some good times. And the one thing on these podcasts is we tend to celebrate the achievements and the high points. And, it's really easy to look back on 4.5 years of really tough work and summarize it all in a positive light. I hope I did that. I hope I told you how great the company is, how well things are going. The truth is, though, there's beneath the tip of the iceberg is all the real stuff. And there's so much struggle and so much hardship and difficulty just to get the business off the ground, just to get to the next level, just to hire this person. And I don't want anyone to think that our journey has been anything short of with all that difficulty piled into it. But the thing that I love about your question about that memory is that's one of those times where you say, you know what, it's all been worth it. This is so fun and we're having a good laugh. And, I come from a super conservative family. My mom was not in love with the tattoo when she saw it, but it was sort of I don't care. It's not for her. It's for me and my partners, and we're kind of commemorating that experience in this journey. So
that's awesome. I think that's always an important thing to remember too. Being an entrepreneur is extremely difficult, and it can give you the lowest lows, but also the highest highs, and it's a roller coaster, and that's part of the journey, right? Versus climbing a corporate ladder, you're allowed to take the elevator. Just all the buttons are written in a different language. You don't know which level's which yet.
Yeah.
But that's part of the thrill ride, right? So Taylor, we're wrapping up here, but tell the audience if they wanted to connect with you, maybe reach out about your prep services, your warehouse services, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Well, I think the best place for them to learn anything and connect with anyone in our company is myfbaprep.com. And if you say myfbaprep.com/blog, you can read some articles about us. Sales at My FBA Prep if you have questions, and Taylor Smits on LinkedIn, and Taylor at My FBA Prep is my email. And come find any of us anywhere, and we really enjoy talking to. We don't care if people are clients or not. We enjoy talking to e-commerce people, period, in general. So send us a note, send us a tweet, and we'll love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Taylor.
Greg, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, and I hope to catch you in some faraway land sometime.
For sure going to happen. See you there.
All right, talk soon.
There you have it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you inspired at all the different things that are happening in this industry. And of course, if you just want to buy a highly profitable business, you can always go to empireflippers.com/marketplace. Or maybe you want to make an exit of your highly profitable business, and you could go to empireflippers.com/sell your site. I've been your host, Greg. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a review, give us a like, a follow, share it across social media. Talk to you all soon. See you on the next episode.